Hello, and welcome to the 8th episode of the Financial Incline. I'm your host, John Bovard. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Jason Hauer. Jason is a serial entrepreneur, Inc. 500 list maker, venture and real estate investor, and co-founder of the Garage Group. Jason's background was in the nonprofit space, and he received a master's degree from Xavier University. Jason co-founded the Garage Group around 10 years ago, and he recently exited the company, but continues to stay on to transition the business. Jason built the Garage Group into a very successful company that helps large Fortune 500 businesses innovate and grow like a startup. In our conversation today, we discussed the entrepreneurial spirit and attributes that led to his success. We discuss how he was able to grow and scale the Garage Group, the strategies he presents to Fortune 500 companies to help them create ideas, and lastly, we discuss his next chapter, how Jason approaches managing his wealth and different investments, what he looks for in a business he would buy, and how he is finding opportunities to help startups. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Financial Incline with John Bovard. John is the owner of Incline Wealth Advisors. All opinions expressed by John or any podcast guest are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Incline Wealth Advisors. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Incline Wealth Advisors may maintain positions in securities discussed on this podcast.
Hey, Jason, thanks for joining me today.
Good to see you, John.
All right, well, good. So I obviously gave a brief introduction with a little bit of background, but for people watching this or for people listening, if you wouldn't mind kind of going into a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm from the west side of Cincinnati, grew up very entrepreneurial, and I actually started off in like information engineering undergrad from UC. Was in IT leadership in the nonprofit space for a while, did an MBA in marketing at Xavier, and then really dove into, that was my first time diving into innovation and entrepreneurship. And so I started the Garage Group, which I recently exited about a decade ago. And we've built that into like a very, very successful company. And I'm working there now to help transition the business and figuring out what's next for me. So fun entrepreneurial ride so far.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And that's why I'm thrilled to have you on the show today. I know that you've got just that entrepreneurial spirit. I love the whole courageous minds only mantra that you've established at Garage Group. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of taking us back to, where you were early stages, kind of the idea that you had for Garage Group, and then what led to that decision to go out and take the leap of faith and start the Garage Group?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up very entrepreneurial. I had paper routes, lemonade stands, would shovel like snow for money, etc. And this is kind of how I grew up. My brother and I would do that kind of stuff all the time. And I think when you start to go out into the real world, like coming out of college, I almost felt like I needed some like life experience. So that's what kind of led me to working a couple different jobs where I feel like I was able to develop skills and that sort of thing. But like that entrepreneurial fire was always still in me. I'm a serial entrepreneur at heart. And so I think it was this combination of my just life experience and confidence in my skill set growing, and just kind of that internal fire. I think it was, a lot of people don't talk about it, but starting my career out in the nonprofit, my wife Tracy and I had like a really solid budget, and we kind of were forced to live pretty lean out of the gate. And then it was just conviction and passion for a kind of a business in an area where I felt like I could go all in on. And so those kind of three things coming together is what led me to co-founding the Garage Group. And I kind of wanted it mentally kind of to have a couple of years of runway saved up, as well as just felt like something that I was passionate about, because if I have conviction for something, I know I can make it work, and I'm going to put the effort into it, right? So, so that entrepreneurial spirit combined with the other two things is what led me to really kind of dive into starting the company.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, that's great. And obviously, first couple years of launching anything, you're probably not bringing much home, in way of financially. So was there a certain budget that you stuck to, or, anything early on where you said, okay, we need to have this amount saved before I'll launch? Or how did you make those early decisions of, do I take this money and use it to live off of, or do I plow this back into the business? What
Yeah.
sort of process were you going through there?
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful to kind of think back on it. So I don't necessarily know that it was that exact. I just know we had a very lean budget. And then we had saved some money up, and then we bootstrapped the garage group. So when we jumped into that company, we had, we already had clients paying us.
Okay.
So we had some pilots and that sort of thing. But so I don't, outside of like the end of year 2, where we started making some pretty strategic decisions in terms of focus, we always had salaries. Like, and even in the leanest times, we kind of like went down to half salaries, right? So
Yep.
I don't think there was ever like, hey, I'm going to jump and we're going to work for 2 years with no salaries and see if we can make it work.
Right.
It's more of like lay the ground. And I always tell people this too, like lay the groundwork first before you jump, and then still stay lean in your budget. But yeah, and then obviously, like as we built the business, like there was maybe some distributions we would take, but most of the time we plow profits back into the business.
Yep.
And that's really what we leverage for growth capital.
Yeah, that's great. And so in those early stages, it's obviously you and a co-founder. If you wouldn't mind sharing, if you can think about it, what were some of the first hires that you started to make? So I know you have a strong, one of your strong characteristics is you're very good with marketing and growing. So as you're building that business, who were some of the people? What were some of the roles that you started to hire for so that you could start to delegate some of those things early on?
Yeah, so I think 2 answers. One is like how I think about hiring in general in a startup, but then 2, I can get into the roles. Like, I think if you're outside of like buying a franchise, and this just going through the grind of building your own business, there's a lot of uncertainties, right? A lot of assumptions you make that go into your business. And so I'm really big on, as a kind of early stage CEO, thinking about the business model and the repeatability in the model in terms of what you represent in the world, how you get clients, how you service those clients, et cetera, right? And I think the first 2 years for my partner, Ann, and I, when we first started, it was a lot of experimentation to say, okay, we have this cool mission, but what does it actually really mean?
Right.
What does it look like to help these organizations operate like a startup? What's the pain that they want to pay us to solve? And not, right. And so I think that a couple of years of experimentation and really nailing that down kind of led us then to say, okay, this is who we're going after, this is the value proposition, and then this is the delivery model we're going to leverage. We actually leveraged like research contractors out of the gate and said, okay, can we make it work that way? And then when we got to a sufficient volume level, then we started to hire, right? Okay. So it was vision, experimentation, pretty clear division of labor that started to emerge, and then we contracted where we could, and then we hired. So like on the delivery side of the business, that was kind of directors that could run projects, that was research consultants, and then on the business operations side, that was someone who was kind of a pseudo chief operating officer, somebody who could run our day-to-day marketing, and that evolved over time as well.
Yeah.
Still strategic insight and input from me and the team, but it really kind of fell out of that experimentation and that division of labor emerging.
Yeah, that's great. I know, because that's something I think about all the time. Who are, and there's the different books, whether it's Traction or Good to Great, to talk about having the right people in the right seats is so important early on when you're building a business. And Obviously, delegation is key. You need to hone in on what your superpowers are, so to speak. And if it's not something you're great at, how to get that work off of your plate so that you can continue to grow the business.
Yeah. And I think you have to earn the right to do that. I think it's easy to kind of look at it in principle, but it's really hard to delegate out of the gate when you don't even know what the model is. And that's where I think you earn your way there to be able to have more support once you feel good about the direction you're going, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, good. So I know at Garage Group, you're advising and you're giving advice to Fortune 500 companies, right? And you're teaching them, how to innovate or solve problems for them. So what were some of the things that you helped these Fortune 500 companies accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I was sharing before, our mission is helping these large blue chip brands innovate and grow like startups, right?
Yep.
So in some cases, that's how do you keep Kraft mac and cheese relevant? To how do you help Nike extend into like a subscription business model for kids shoes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the projects kind of vary, but to me, at the core of it is helping these leaders. If you think about an entrepreneur, like they're great at falling in love with a problem. They're great at looking outside the industry to bring interesting new ideas and perspectives in terms of solving the problems. And then they don't just put their heads down and execute. They might run experiments and say, okay, are we on the right track with this idea? Are we talking about it the right way?
Yep.
Right. And that's a lot of what we bring to the table, is really helping them, whether it's in the core business or if they're expanding into new areas, really understand the consumer problems they're trying to solve for. Are they inspired up, so to speak, in terms of like bringing in the right external perspective to push their thinking? And then are they really like honoring the consumer input as they're optimizing ideas and not falling in love with bad ideas too early, et cetera? Because I want a leader to have conviction to go forward with something and or conviction to kill an idea.
Right.
And the game of innovation, like both are okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of like how we work with clients and how we work with them today is just kind of, I would say, more applied, like consulting, applied strategy consulting, if you will, in terms of some consumer research workshops, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what would you say, led to the majority of your growth? I mean, obviously you're providing great intellectual capital to your clients and your customers. So how were you able to grow and scale your business? What were some of the key things that led to that growth?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things, but I mean, I would go back to, I think this is true of the Garage Group, but I think it's true of most businesses that I've seen that have been successful, is do you have a proposition that really is baked in a meaningful mission? And then is it differentiated, and does it really solve like an important like customer or consumer problem?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you can nail really solid, strong problem you're solving with a great like differentiated solution that you have conviction for, then I think you're golden, right? So like we had that in terms of Garage Group with this Courageous Minds Only, like helping these teams operate like startups, which is differentiated from other firms that are really like maybe more traditional management consulting, if you will. And then beyond that, then I think it's just, can you deliver on that promise? And year in and year out, we've got a really solid team that just does exceptional work with clients. And that's what creates that flywheel of, okay, you can talk about it, but can you actually deliver that, right? And so I think it's being about that, or from a how you position, but then being able to deliver on that, and then that enables like client to client referral. That creates opportunities in terms of as the relevancy of the brand grow, and then it paves the way to start to kind of experiment with other ways of getting the word out from a marketing and brand building standpoint, right? So I think but I always go back to, really, really clear on what you're solving and how you're solving it. And then is your brand differentiated? And then what's the culture? When I talk about conviction for the brand, that kind of gets into the culture of your team too, right? Like, do your employees or your team members and partners like eat and breathe that every day? Because customers feel that, consumers feel that, right?
Right.
And I think when you have that, then there's so many like strategies and tactics you can use to grow in terms of LinkedIn outreach or conferences we've done, speaking, great content that you're putting out on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But then within the context of that, it's just really like, are you truly adding value for the stakeholders that you want to serve, right?
Right. Right. And did you have, I mean, as far as, you know, the delivery, and I'm sure you guys had to be very process oriented. So were there any sort of, you know, obviously you had your mission and you had your vision. What did you do to make sure that you were staying consistent, right? So that every time you get a new client, there's a certain process that you follow for helping them solve their problem. And then, you know, continuing that to be, okay, now we've got one client. And then when you get to however many clients it is, 50, 100 different clients, making sure that you're still delivering that consistent value add to them over and over again.
Yeah. I think it's, from a graduate perspective, it's a little bit tricky in that a lot of what we do is custom.
Yep.
But I think it's hiring the right people who like are super smart, but they're also entrepreneurial and passionate about what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we developed some IP around what we call our lean growth playbook, which was really how we define consumer problems, how we help them come up with ideas, and how we help them test as they think about kind of going to market with ideas. So I think that IP was super helpful. But to be honest with you, like, it's something that I think the business still struggles with today, because like what we do is so complex and it's so hard, and the way that the market has even shifted over the past couple of years with COVID is like it's created a lot of uncertainty and a lot of turbulence in the market, right? But
Yep.
I think for business owners and entrepreneurs that are listening, I think it really goes back to how are you differentiating your business or your brand, and then are you really honoring that and delivering that from a delivery perspective? And then it's from a leadership standpoint, it's creating a culture that says this is the vision, this is how we're going to operate, and then it's just continuous learning mindset that comes through. Okay, we did that project, let's talk about how it went, how could it be better, how could we improve that, right? And
Right.
I think that then it breeds that culture, but it also breeds then more sustained kind of delivery quality, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And then over time, we got into things where we're doing surveys at the end of projects for clients to be able to share their perspective, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And, you know, one of the things that's in selfishly, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because, you know, you were, you know, the Garage Group is a service-based business. I'm running a service-based business, and there's obviously a difference between, you know, owning a business and running it and kind of being self-employed, as opposed to a true business owner where you can step back and the business will still run even without you. And, you know, obviously service-based businesses, that's one of the hardest steps. One of the hardest things to accomplish is, you know, if the business is running on your expertise and you're such a huge part of that business, how do you ensure that this business can last and can still run even without you necessarily being there?
Yeah, it's a hard thing. Like, I don't necessarily know, like, just transparently, like I don't know that I completely have it figured out. I think that's an area like I'm definitely like towards the end of being an owner at the Garage Group, like I'm learning and growing through. But I think like how I've thought about like ownership in general, like the job of an owner is to cast the vision, put the right people in the right seats, like you're talking about before, and then not running out of money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think when you can embrace that, whether you're a passive or absentee owner or you're running the business, I think it's helpful. I think I think that's to me probably the key more than anything. And then as I thought about, like, for me, I'm this creative entrepreneur and I like to just be in the trenches, roll up my sleeves and do it. And I think to be able to bring people along, you almost have to your point on process, like you have to create strategies and processes and approaches for how you do things and codify that to be able to bring people into that and almost have like a franchise mentality, right? And so like a lot of the sales and marketing approaches and strategies, like I leverage, is more instinct than it is like I'm following an exact playbook, right? And so in some of our businesses, I think we're able to nail it down to a process in to codify that and bring people along. And there's still other things that I think when you, as an entrepreneur, or as just a creative or just business leader, when you operate more like out of instinct, and I'm speaking for myself here, like it is a harder thing to be able to bring people along into, but it's absolutely necessary if you truly want to be more of a hands-off owner, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's it's obviously never easy to quantify. And like you said, kind of being able to step back, and obviously you're leaning a lot on the people that you're working with and the processes that you have in place. So earlier on this year, I know there was a big event that you went through with the garage group. So if you wouldn't mind kind of filling us in on what happened there, what took place, if there was a transaction, or kind of what your next phase with the garage group is.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I'm at heart like a serial entrepreneur. Like that's I love starting kind of and building and growing companies. And so I've been doing this for over a decade now. And I think it's been on my mind for a while. Like, hey, I'm ready for the next thing, kind of a fresh start. And so I think my partners and I like just kind of aligned to selling the company, and it's kind of an incredible thing. But we had a couple of leaders on our management team buy the business, and so that was effective like mid-June. I'm staying on a year to help transition a lot of the like client relationships and bring the team along from a sales and marketing perspective. So hence like the point that I was making before.
Yeah.
And so, so it's an exciting thing to bootstrap something from basically nothing, being the Inc. 500 and Inc. 5000 a couple years, and then to be able to exit it. So I'm still just as passionate as I started the business in terms of the mission, and I think very highly of Megan and Aaron who bought the business, and excited for the future of the garage groups and helping the transition. And then personally, it's been a fun journey for me to just kind of think through diversifying my personal wealth and like what do I want to get into next. And I think kind of what I'm thinking about today really is continuing to master kind of buying and growing businesses. I don't know that I completely want to start from scratch, but I think where I'm at is like I'd like to really learn how to buy and build businesses, leveraging kind of my expertise, which is really kind of that sales and marketing driven CEO, but along with the innovation and growth kind of aspects. And then trying to balance that out with what am I putting in from a passive, almost hands-off passive incomes, because I really on the business side, I feel like if I can pair where I'm an expert at with my capital, I'm going to get the best return going forward. So that's kind of one pillar. Another pillar is really just kind of hands-off passive income. And then third is really just growth stocks, S&P 500, that kind of thing as I go forward. And just just kind of thinking through kind of the right portfolio construction that way, as well as like almost like the lines in the field were clear when I was building the garage group. On the business side, it's like redrawing those lines, so I know exactly like what it is that I'm going after, right? And I think it's important like to do that, because like sometimes when it's not as clear, I feel like anxious around, like I'm ready to get going, but then paralyzed because I'm not making as much progress as I want to, right? So that personal journey of saying, okay, what is the next game I'm playing from a business perspective? And then doing a little bit of the work on passive income and growth, more growth ETFs than anything. So that's not my expertise, right? So
Yeah.
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 And then spending more time with my family, and just kind of hitting a little bit of a reset button, because it's a journey, building a business over a decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like it's funny because like a lot of like my entrepreneur friends that have had exits, they tell me I should take a 6 month sabbatical, and I kind of look at them like, that sounds like an interesting idea, but I don't know if that's me. But it's an interesting thing that way, right? So
Yeah, I don't think I could imagine doing that. I mean, obviously I'm on the complete opposite end of the spectrum right now with my business compared to where you're at with Garage Group, but it would be hard to turn it off. To kind of flip the
yeah,
switch on the sabbatical. But yeah, I loved how you described that, kind of your different buckets and your capital allocation. One of the things that I help, clients out with is the term that I use for it is kind of your wealth allocation framework, right? So you've
yeah,
got your kind of your safe bucket. That's your cash, that's your personal assets, that's your home. And that's what's going to get you through to maintain, a standard of living, to pay the bills every month, your conservative cash money. Then you've got your market risk. So your market bucket, that is your stocks, your bonds, your kind of run of the mill, like you talked about, S&P 500, your growth assets, your growth stocks. And then your third, wealth allocation framework is kind of that aspirational. So that would be new businesses that you're buying. That would be private equity. It could be real estate investments. That's your aspirational bucket. That's what could essentially take you to a new level of wealth, so to speak. So, your
yeah,
market assets, those are going to continue to grow, and you can replenish your safe bucket of money with your market assets as those are doing well. That helps to maintain a certain standard of living. And then, yeah, your aspirational wealth, which is maybe you can hit a home run on another company that you're buying. So it helps to kind of compartmentalize. Okay, you went through an exit. Now what? How should you be thinking about your money? And that's one of the ways, one of the frameworks that I try to help clients out with. And it sounds like you've got that in place. That's something that you're thinking through.
yeah. It's definitely a journey before, for sure. And I think like the biggest thing is like, if time if time isn't an issue, it's like everything looks interesting, right? But I think as I've reflected on it, again, like the creativity comes in and everything looks interesting, right? But as I've really thought through, like, what am I passionate about, and what do I want to continue to that your aspirational bucket you're talking about, what do I want to continue to drive forward? It really is the buying, improving, and selling businesses, and just continuing to become really, really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's saying, if that's true, then how do I orient the rest of my investment activities to be smart and allocated in the right way, but as passive as possible, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. So now that you're transitioning out of it, so what sort of resources are you consuming? So whether that be content you're listening to, books you're reading, groups, conferences, anything like that you are, listening to or reading up on to help educate yourself on, buying and growing businesses, or, kind of helps with that, with the skill set that you have and that continuous learning. What are some of the things that you're utilizing right now?
Yeah, and I'll share this too, because it's not, to me, like, anybody can kind of share books. Like, I feel like over time I've developed like just a good habit of trying to listen to like an audio book a week. I think it's when you're drinking from a fire hose building a business or launching something new, then it's not as easy to do that. But I would just encourage everybody to, don't stop learning when you graduate school, or like if you've been working for a while, like try to so like a lot of what I do is audiobooks. And then I would just say, like, kind of what the recent track I've been on, it has been kind of acquisition entrepreneurship. So it's Buy Then Build by Walker Dybel is something that I've read recently. I was just sharing this with you before we jumped on, John, about the capitalism conference that I attended in Austin recently, where it was a bunch of serial entrepreneurs that had built and sold $100 million plus brands, right? And it was
Yep.
just hearing their presentations, but being able to connect with them and pick their brains on how they've done it, their mindset. Because a lot of this isn't just like technically how do you do it. It's like it's a mindset and it's a drive, because not everything's going to be successful and you just have to stay with it, right?
Right.
So I'm a big fan of that. So Buy Then Build is definitely, if you're ever interested in like acquisition entrepreneurship, it's a really good read. To me, it's a gateway to a lot of other resources that are interesting. And then I'm a big fan of Dan DeMarco. I think I'm saying his first name right, but he wrote Millionaire Fast, or is it? I'm trying to think of.
Is it Millionaire?
Yeah, Millionaire. I I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Millionaire Fastlane. He's really good. He's a little bit out there, but it's a good book. So
yeah.
But those are to me interesting. And then the only other things that I've kind of like had re-listened to and dove back into is there's to me a set of books around more personal like habits and behaviors that allow you to kind of to be successful and to continually get better. So whether it's Atomic Habits, the Compound Effect, or The Slight Edge, like those are three books that I would highly recommend, because it's all about this daily continuous improvement. And I think a lot of this stuff, it's easy to look at, okay, you started to build a business, or you want to get in great shape, or you want to continue to get better, whatever you do. And a lot of it comes back to your mindset every day. Are you waking up to try to get a little bit better and to push yourself or not? So
yeah, no doubt. And then the one of the books that you recommended I read is Gino Wickman's Traction. That one was, and still is. I mean, I think I read that back at the beginning of the year, and I still pull that out. I still use his Vision Traction Organizer for my business and the entrepreneurial operating system. Where it lays out your 90-day goals, your 1-year goals, your 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, mapping all of that out, and then sticking to it, and obviously establishing your core values for your company. What are the things that, like you mentioned before with Garage Group, what do you do that differentiates your business from anyone else's business? That one.
I think it's hard because like a lot of times I have an MBA and I understand business, but I like my skill set is sales and marketing more so than anything, and like and innovation, obviously. And when you start a business, it's not just about what you bring to the table. You're building this living, breathing organism, interconnected organism, right? And I think frameworks like that Traction are super helpful because they help you to see your business for all the functional aspects of what has to be true to run a successful, sustainable business. And I think it's so easy to kind of steer towards what your functional expertise is out of the gate, right? So that's great. It's Millionaire Fastlane and then Unscripted were the two from Dan DeMarco that are really good.
I'll make sure to mention those in the show notes and put out links to those as well. So one of the other things I wanted to touch on, just from our conversations personally, I know one of the things that you're getting into now is real estate. So what has been your sort of your vision for investing in real estate, and what's kind of your thought process of essentially why you're looking to start investing in real estate?
Yeah, it's interesting because like I think depending on who you talk to, there's certain people that love it. There are certain people who never would touch it. And then there's people who think they might like it and they try it and it's like, it's not for me. And so just taking all those different perspectives, I wanted to just buy basically a single family rental. It required some rehab work and just go through the process to say, is this something like I'm really interested in or not? And it's interesting because I'm like halfway through the process of rehabbing a property. Took me a while, given kind of the way the market is, it took me a little bit to find it. And a deal that worked for me in terms of both equity and eventual cash flow. And so I'm still a little bit TBD in terms of me driving the primary like the work on it? Am I going to continue to do that or not? I think the more that I really understand about buying and flipping and improving and flipping businesses, I almost feel like I may be in this place where I go more passive with real estate versus like I'm driving it. So maybe you can still get some of the benefits from if I'm doing more syndications, then I'm the one that's actually finding and doing the deals.
Yeah.
But it's, so one, I'm definitely interested in it. Two, I'm like experimenting, but then three, my ongoing strategy, I almost feel like there might be easier ways for me to dabble in real estate than just kind of single family, like just do all the work, right? So,
Right.
and it goes back to this guy Sam I was talking to this week, who I met at a capitalism conference. Really nice guy, very smart. But he was telling me one of the best things to think about is where can you pair up your talents with your capital for the best returns, and then try to minimize your involvement in other passive investments or equity type investments, right? And so even though it's interesting and I can get good returns on the real estate side, like there's part of me that's like, man, it's an opportunity cost on trying to hunt down my next business and that sort of thing, right? So it's so that's my current thought process right now, man.
Yeah. I can definitely, relate to that. It's going to be, where you allocate your time to. You're your best asset, right? And if you're spending your time, looking for deals or going through that process, it's got to be difficult on top of the other things like buying and selling businesses. So one of the questions that I have for you, and this is true for real estate deals, or it's true for businesses. What have you gone through to try and source or to find good deals? And I'm asking that more so from the realm of business ownership, purchasing businesses, because I know there's a lot of people that they have capital. They've got their market assets are taken care of, right? They've got their retirement plans established. Those are kind of, they're running somewhat on autopilot now, but it intrigues them, owning a private business, owning a startup is something that would be good. So are there places or are there resources that you look to try to find deals or find entrepreneurs or connect with people?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like the sales and marketing strategy mentality. Like as you're trying to build your brand and go after customers, if you're not very, very clear on the person or the audience you're trying to serve, like you're kind of wasting your time.
Yeah.
And I would take that analog and apply it to whether it's real estate deals, businesses, etc. Like you have to draw the lines in the sand to say, this is what I'm going after and this is my strategy. And I in real estate, like I wavered for months and months of, am I going after a single family? Am I going after a 4-family? Should I go into like an apartment deal with other people who are experienced? And then I didn't do anything. And the moment that I got clear on this is my strategy, then it's like, okay, then I can actually put the work in. Well, how can I go find that fits criteria in terms of my cash on cash return, my IRR for the deal, the equity that I want, the cash flow that I want, and then it's super easy then to evaluate it, right?
Right.
And so to me, it's you have to get super focused on what is it that you really are going after and what's a good deal for you, and then put the work in to say, okay, how am I sourcing those deals? How am I evaluating them? And then do I have the means to kind of to actually do the deal and convert, and then just follow it through, right? It's like it's a sales funnel.
Right.
Then from a business perspective, like I'm kind of working. Walker Deibel with Buy Them Bill does a really good job of framing that up in terms of what is the skill set you bring to the table, and then like what's your target EBITDA number? Are you using debt or not? Because like a lot of that then goes into, okay, this is kind of the profile of the business I'm going after, and then building relationships with brokers, looking at sites like Quiet Light, but maybe not too much outside of that, right? So like where business is listed, and then And then it's really like a lot of like just networking, right?
Yeah.
But it goes back to like understanding enough about what are the different types of strategies you can employ, but then pick a strategy and go. Like,
Right.
otherwise you're going to waste your time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that, like, so I
Yeah.
tend to, I don't necessarily overthink things, but I like to understand things and what are the options and what's a better option of single family versus multifamily, et cetera, right?
Yes. Right.
And then what drove me back on real estate, what drove me back to the single family was you learn the process for any of the deals that way. And a lot of people, like, if you skip that step, you skip the, is it really for you? Do you understand the business in a kind of a low risk way, right?
Yeah. Right.
Buying up rental properties, like you're creating your own little franchise or your
Yeah.
little business, right? So.
Right. Right. Yeah. And one of the questions I had just, from talking with you, if you had to, if you had to go back and, to your early days of having an idea, for the garage group, if you could, wave a magic wand, do it all over again, do you think you would, start garage group from the ground up? So bootstrap it, start the business yourself? Or if you could rewind time and say, no, I think I'd rather try to find a business that's already existed and buy that and then build that. So
Yeah.
if you could go back in time, if you could do it all over again, would you do it the same way that you did it? Or would you try to buy an existing business to grow that?
No, I would, because I feel like you learn when you start from scratch, like the learning curve is incredible, right? And I'm all about, like, if you want to be successful in business, you can't just kind of act like you know what you're talking about. Like, you have to feel the pain.
Yeah.
And when you start something, you understand and appreciate how much time and effort it takes to actually make it work. You appreciate, like, your partners and what they bring to the table, your team, and you just, there's so much like learning and growth that happens when you start and build something.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand it's not just about, like, I create a marketing strategy and I went, or sales. Like, you actually learn, like, oh shit, I tried this and it didn't work. I gotta keep going. I gotta adjust.
Right.
And you just feel it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily know that I would change the start and the build aspect, but I would say, like, as I understand more about acquisition entrepreneurship, I probably would have employed more like mergers and acquisitions for growth, to accelerate growth, versus trying to do everything organically, because organic growth is super hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I hear you there.
And I would encourage, like, people, if you're thinking about starting something, like, there's something about being battle tested and in kind of learning through the grind, learning through kind of the mud, that it changes you. I think it makes you stronger, better, but I think it just gives you a deeper, like, understanding of how to build and sustain a business, and a deeper appreciation of it. And
Right.
I think people that ultimately don't drive to some kind of successful outcome in entrepreneurship, I think they need to believe in themselves, but it's just time on task. And
Yeah.
it's so many, like, really successful serial entrepreneurs that I've connected with, or it's 7th, 8th, 9th company. It's easy to look at, they just had $100 million exit, but you don't look at the 8 other either failures or kind of like okay companies that they ran to kind of learn the skill set and kind of build and grow from there, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, good. And last question, Jason, before I let you go, is, obviously this is the financial podcast, and for a lot of the listeners, and myself included, one goal that people have is to be financially free, and not necessarily retire, but to have financial freedom to choose what you want to do, when you want to do it, and who you want to do it with. So is there, in your mind, someone that's gone through an exit, is there a certain goal or certain number in mind of when you say, okay, now I feel like I'm truly financially free? Or for you, is that some sort of moving target? But how would you define that moment of when you've reached financial freedom?
I think I'm working through it right now, honestly. Like, it's interesting, because I think you think like you're free when you build something and sell it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love to learn. I love to challenge myself, and it's like I felt the most alive and free when I'm actually like building something meaningful and really contributing to society, and like
Yeah.
it just creating opportunities for people to learn and grow and adding value. And so, and it's in the grind is when I actually feel like really solid there, right? So it's like it's this balance of, for me, it's like knowing that I like to do that. What is really the balance for me as I go forward of being able to operate in that space, but then have enough passive income that exceeds my expenses, as well as enough where I'm actually kind of have an eye towards, I'm 43 now, like if I ever like retire with late 50s, early 60s, like what does that look like for me, right? And so
Right.
like freedom to me right now is just setting up kind of the system and the portfolio of like my investments, and are they growing, and can I like not have to worry about them and think about them,
Mm-hmm.
and can I continue to operate in a space that I'm alive in, that I want to continue learning, grow in, right? And
Yeah.
so it's less on any like one specific number. I think maybe when I started the company or even before that, I thought it might be if a couple mil or whatever would be interesting, but like for me now, it's really set the system up and then continue to learn and grow on what I'm great at, and continue to create opportunities for other people, continue to add value,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's really kind of that space
Yeah.
that I'm in right now for sure. So
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah. I love that kind of building out an empire, so to speak, building enough.
yeah. But I mean, it's just like it's like if
Assets.
you think about like the compounding interest and other things, like you want stuff to continue to go.
Right.
But then there's something in me, it's like I still have a lot left to give in terms of like building and improving companies and creating opportunity. And like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's dangerous to just fixate on a number. Like I think it's helpful to have it in terms of just the math and the logic, but
Right.
for me, it's like it's much more about kind of get the system set up and running, and then get to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. So, Jason, I appreciate you joining me today. And for anyone that's looking to connect with you on social media, where's the best place where they can find you at?
Yeah, just like you find me Facebook or Instagram is just my first last name, Jason Hauer, and then on LinkedIn as well. So yeah.
All right. Well, great. And again, thanks for sharing your insight and sharing your wisdom today with us, and wish you the best of luck going forward.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate you having me, man. Keep crushing it.
All right. Thanks, Jason.